My daughter-in-law pushed me to the floor right at the Thanksgiving dinner table. She said, "That seat is for the in-laws. Get out." In front of the entire family, my son just stood there silent like nothing had happened. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I said 4 words. My son's wine glass slipped from his hand and shattered. My daughter-in-law went pale. "My name is Donna Rivera. I'm 72, a widowed retired elementary school teacher who spent 35 years shaping young minds. Now I live in the small guest house behind my son's house in Chesterfield, Missouri. The big house, the one my late husband left me. I still hold the deed to, but I let my son manage it and I pay him rent every month like any tenant would. That's how it's been for years." That Thanksgiving afternoon, the table was set for 14 people. The good china, the turkey carved just right, laughter coming from the main room. I carried in the album of old family photos, pictures of my son as a boy, of me holding my granddaughter when she was brand new, thinking maybe today we could remember what family used to mean. I tried to take the empty chair near my granddaughter. That's when my daughter-in-law stood up, put her hand on the back of my chair, and pulled. I hit the floor hard. The room went dead quiet. 14 people, forks frozen midair, eyes on their plates. No one moved, no one spoke. My son just stood there, wine glass slipping from his fingers, shattering on the hardwood. My daughter-in-law's face drained of color. And in that silence, I looked up at them all and said 4 words. "We are done here." I got up on my own, walked to the coat closet, took my things and left. Nobody followed. If you've ever been treated like an outsider by your own family, drop a comment below. What would you have done in that moment? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss how this all unfolds, because trust me, it's far from over. It was one of those crisp Missouri mornings when the cold sneaks in before the sun has a chance to fight it off. I woke to the familiar whistle of wind slipping through the old window frames in the guest house. The kind of sound that reminds you the house was built in the 1970s and never quite sealed properly. I pulled on my robe, shuffled to the kitchenette and started the coffee maker. While it gurgled, I stood at the sink and looked out across the yard toward the main house. The lights were already on in the kitchen window. Someone was up early, probably Sarah, getting breakfast ready for Olivia. I poured the coffee into my favorite mug, the one with the faded "World's Best Teacher" print, and sat at the small table. Out of habit, I opened my phone to check the Zelly app. There it was, the transfer from the first of the month, $1,200 to Michael Rivera. Right on time like always. I had been sending that exact amount for 10 years now. Every payment timestamped, every confirmation screenshot saved in a folder labeled rent. I started the habit back when I first moved into the guest house. Teachers keep records, it's what we do. Receipts for field trips, lesson plans, parent conferences, same principle. Document everything. I scrolled back through the folder sometimes just to see the pattern. 10 years, 120 payments, $144,000. I paid it because I wanted to help my son. He and Sarah had taken on the big house after my husband passed, and I figured contributing was the right thing. Family helps family. But sitting there with my coffee going cold, I couldn't ignore the quiet truth that had been growing for a while. I was paying rent to live in a property I still legally owned. The deed had never been transferred. My husband and I had talked about it once years ago, but Michael never brought it up again, and I never pushed. I told myself it didn't matter. It was still our family home. The guest house was small, 1 bedroom, a living area that doubled as a kitchen, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. The furniture was the same I'd had in our old apartment before we bought the big house. A worn couch, bookshelves crammed with paperbacks and photo albums, a quilt my mother made draped over the armchair. It was cozy in its way, but it always felt temporary, like I was a guest who'd stayed too long. Over the years, the small slights had piled up. Michael and Sarah invited Robert and Linda Thompson to stay in the main house for long weekends, far more often than they invited me over for dinner. I'd see Linda's car in the driveway on Saturday mornings, hear laughter coming from the kitchen as they cooked together. They'd grill steaks on the patio, open bottles of wine I'd never been offered. Birthdays were the clearest marker. My birthday in March usually passed with a card from Olivia, if Sarah remembered to have her sign it, and maybe a phone call from Michael if he wasn't working late. Linda's birthday in June, though, that got a small family dinner in the dining room, flowers on the table, a cake Olivia helped decorate. I was invited once, sat at the end of the table and left early. Contact with Olivia had become more limited too. She was 14 now, busy with school and friends, but I used to pick her up after soccer practice or take her to the library on weekends. Sarah started scheduling those visits herself. Olivia has a lot on her plate, she'd say. The visits got shorter then less frequent. I told myself it was normal teenagers' drift, but it stung. Michael mentioned the trust fund a few times over the years. Dad's money is set aside for Olivia's college, he'd say when I asked about it. We're saving it for her future. I never saw statements, never asked for them. I trusted him. He was my son. Family is blood, I reminded myself. Blood takes care of blood. But the reminders were wearing thin. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, and stared at the main house again. The lights were brighter now. Everyone was awake. I felt the familiar weight settle in my chest, not anger, yet just a deep, quiet tiredness. 2 days before Thanksgiving, the phone rang. It was Sarah. After Sarah's call, I set the phone down and stared at the wall for a long moment. Her words had been polite on the surface, but the message was clear. I wasn't being asked to contribute. I was being told where to fit. I decided to make the effort anyway. Thanksgiving had always been my favorite holiday, not for the food, though I loved the ritual of it, but for the quiet sense that everyone was in the same room, breathing the same air, sharing the same table. Even if that table had shrunk for me over the years? I started in the kitchenette the next morning. The stuffing came first. My husband's recipe: celery, onions sautéed until soft, sage from the garden we used to keep, bread cubes toasted the night before. I chopped everything slowly, the knife steady in my hand. Each time I made it, I could hear his voice from the other side of the counter teasing me about measuring too precisely. It's stuffing, Donna, not a math problem. I smiled at the memory and kept going. This was my last attempt to bridge the gap, to remind them that I still belonged in the kitchen, still knew how to make the meal taste like home. The pumpkin pie followed. I used the canned pumpkin, everyone does, but I added extra cinnamon and a pinch of nutmeg the way my mother taught me. The crust I made from scratch, rolling the dough on the tiny countertop until it was thin and even. When it came out of the oven, the house filled with that warm spice smell that always made everything feel right for a little while. While the pie cooled, I pulled the photo album from the shelf. It was heavy, the cover worn soft from years of handling. I sat on the couch and opened it slowly. There was Michael at 5, gap-toothed grin, holding a fish he'd caught at the lake. There I was in my 30s, hair shorter, then cradling Olivia the day she was born, her tiny face red and wrinkled, my arms wrapped around her like she was the most important thing in the world. Pages later, the 4 of us, me, my husband Michael, and Sarah at their wedding. Everyone smiling. The last photo showed Olivia at 8, blowing out candles on her birthday cake, my hand on her shoulder. I traced the edge of the picture with my finger. This album wasn't just photos. It was proof that I had been there, that I had loved them all, that I still did. I wanted to place it on the table tomorrow, open to a page everyone could see, and let the pictures do the talking I couldn't seem to find words for anymore. The call from Sarah had left a knot in my stomach. Don't bring anything fancy, Mom. My parents already took care of most of it, and maybe sit at the small table near the kitchen. It'll be easier for you to help with cleanup. She'd said it casually, like it was practical advice, but I heard the boundary she was drawing. I asked if there was room at the main table. She hesitated just long enough for me to notice. We'll see how many show up, but the small table is fine. I thanked her and hung up. The knot tightened. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the album, about the stuffing, about the pie. They were small things, but they were mine, my contribution. My way of saying I still mattered. I told myself I was overreacting. Holidays were stressful. Everyone had their roles, but the feeling wouldn't leave. Thanksgiving morning arrived clear and cold. I dressed in my favorite navy sweater, the one with the soft collar that always made me feel put together. I wrapped the pie in foil, covered the stuffing dish with a towel, tucked the album under my arm, and walked across the yard. The grass was still damp from overnight frost. Lights glowed in every window of the main house. Cars were already parked along the driveway, Robert and Linda's SUV, a couple of cousins' sedans. The air smelled like wood smoke from someone's fireplace. I knocked once, then let myself in. The warmth hit me immediately, along with the noise: Olivia laughing somewhere in the living room, silverware, clinking, Sarah's voice calling out instructions. Robert and Linda were at the island helping set out appetizers. They nodded hello, polite but distant. Michael came over, gave me a quick hug, took the dishes from my hands. Thanks, Mom. Looks good. He carried them to the kitchen without another word. I stood in the entryway for a second album still under my arm, watching the room move around me. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they fit. I felt like a visitor who had arrived too early. When everyone started taking their seats at the table that afternoon, the dining room smelled of roasted turkey and cinnamon. Plates were already set, napkins folded precisely. I carried the covered dishes to the kitchen counter first, then walked back with the album under my arm. The main table was long seats filled quickly. Michael at the head. Sarah to his right, Olivia beside her. Robert and Linda took the chairs across from them, the ones closest to the window where the light was best. Cousins and a few aunts filled the rest. The small folding table near the kitchen door had one place setting, mine. I hesitated for a second in the doorway, then I walked toward the main table, toward the empty spot next to Olivia. I wanted her to see the album, to flip through the pages with me, to remember the summers we spent at the lake, the holidays when she used to crawl into my lap. I set the album down gently on the cloth and started to pull out the chair. Sarah stood up fast. Her hand went to the back of the chair. She pulled it sharply. The legs scraped against the floor. I lost my balance and hit the hardwood hard. The impact jarred through my hip and shoulder. The album slid off the table and landed face down beside me. The room froze. Forks hovered. Conversations died mid-sentence. 14 faces turned, but no one moved. No one spoke. Sarah looked down at me, her voice level and clear. "That seat is for the in-laws. Get out." My son stood at the carving station, knife still in his hand. He looked at the floor, then at his wine glass. His fingers loosened. The glass tipped red wine spilling across the white cloth before it shattered on the wood. The sound was sharp in the silence. I stayed on the floor for what felt like a long time, though it couldn't have been more than a few seconds. No hand reached down. No voice asked if I was all right. The air felt thick, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for me to disappear so the meal could continue. I pushed myself up slowly. My hip throbbed, but I didn't let it show. I straightened my sweater, picked up the album, and looked around the table one last time. Olivia's eyes were wide. Robert stared at his plate. Linda's lips were pressed thin. Michael hadn't moved. I said 4 words, quiet but steady. "We are done here." I walked to the coat closet in the hallway, took my coat, slipped it on. The front door was only a few steps away. I opened it, stepped outside into the cold air, and closed it behind me without looking back. Nobody followed. The walk across the yard felt longer than usual. The frost had thickened on the grass. I let myself into the guest house, locked the door, and leaned against it for a moment. Then I went to the kitchen table, sat down, and opened my phone. The messages started almost immediately. "Michael, first, Mom, you're overreacting. It was just a chair. Come back and we can talk. Sarah. You fell on your own. Don't turn this into something it wasn't. Robert, let's not ruin the holiday for everyone. Come back and apologize. Be the bigger person." I read each one twice. Then I screenshot them all, timestamped, and saved them in the same folder as the Zelle receipts. I took my phone to the living room, stood at the spot where I'd fallen in my mind's eye, and took 2 photos of the empty floor. Not because I needed proof of bruises, I had none visible, but because I needed to remember exactly where I had been standing when everything changed. I opened a blank note on my phone and started typing. Date, time, what happened, who said what, who did nothing, every detail I could recall. When I finished, I saved it and closed the app. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I just sat there in the quiet, listening to the wind against the windows, feeling the ache in my hip settle into something deeper. 3 days later, sitting alone, going through old papers, I pulled open the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet in the corner of the living room. It was the drawer I hadn't touched in years, the one with the house documents, insurance policies, and the trust papers my husband had set up before he passed. The deed was right on top, folded once still in the envelope from the county recorder's office. I unfolded it carefully. The owner's name was clear, Donna Rivera. No transfer document attached. No quitclaim deed. Nothing signed by me giving the property to Michael. I stared at the page for a long time. My son had been living in that house, calling it his, charging me rent for the guest house behind it for a decade, and the deed had never changed hands. I set the deed aside and reached for the trust folder. My husband had created a revocable living trust in 2008, funded with what we'd saved over the years. Initial balance around $150,000. The purpose was simple: to provide for our granddaughter Olivia's education and future needs. Michael had been named successor trustee after my husband died. I had trusted him with it completely. The bank statements were clipped together at the back. I flipped through them slowly. Withdrawals started in 2015 small, at first then larger, a total of $80,000 over the years. The descriptions were vague: educational expenses, family support, miscellaneous. But I knew what they really were. One withdrawal for $12,000 in 2019 labeled travel fund. I remembered Michael mentioning a trip to Florida that year. Robert and Linda had gone with them. Another for $18,000 in 2021 home improvement. That was the year Sarah posted photos of the new deck on the main house. Robert and Linda had stayed for the summer while it was built. There was nothing for Olivia's tutoring, summer camps, or college savings accounts. No receipts attached, no explanation. I sat back in the chair. The realization hit in stages. First, the deed: I had been paying rent to my own property. Then the trust my husband's money meant for my granddaughter had been used for other people's vacations and renovations. $80,000. That was years of my teacher's salary, overtime, grading papers at night, summers, teaching extra classes. All of it gone. The shock came first, sharp and cold. My hands shook as I stacked the papers. Then came the anger, not loud, not explosive, but steady and clear. I had spent 10 years believing I was helping my son, supporting the family. Instead, I had been funding a life that excluded me. I didn't wait. I opened my laptop, scanned the deed and the bank statements, and attached them to an email. I wrote a brief message to James Carter, the estate attorney I'd met years ago when my husband updated his will. I explained what I'd found, attached the screenshots of the Zelle transfers I'd been saving, the gaslighting texts from Thanksgiving, the short journal entry I'd written that night, and the trust documents. I asked if he could look at it and tell me what my options were. James called me back within the hour. His voice was calm, professional, the way lawyers sound when they've seen this kind of thing before. "Donna, this is straightforward on the deed. The property is still in your name. Michael has no legal title. He's been an occupant, and charging you rent for the guest house constitutes unjust enrichment under Missouri law. You can demand repayment for the past 10 years, though statutes of limitations may limit how far back you can go. 6 years is the typical limit for unjust enrichment claims here, so potentially around $70,000 or more." He paused, then continued. "The trust is more serious. As trustee, Michael had a fiduciary duty to use the funds solely for Olivia's benefit, as outlined in the trust document. Using it for family vacations and home improvements for third parties is a clear breach of fiduciary duty. We can petition to remove him as trustee, freeze the remaining balance, and demand a full accounting. If the withdrawals were unauthorized, we can seek restitution from him personally." I asked what the next steps were. "First, I recommend a formal demand letter. We'll notify him of the breach, freeze any further distributions from the trust, and request repayment for the unauthorized withdrawals. For the house, we can serve a 30-day notice to vacate if you decide to reclaim full possession. But we can start with the demand and see how he responds." I told him to proceed. No hesitation, no second thoughts. The tiredness I'd carried for years had turned into something else: clarity. I was done protecting a lie. James said he'd draft everything and send it over within a few days. I thanked him and hung up. I sat there for a while, looking at the papers spread across the table. The shock had faded. What remained was a quiet, firm decision. I wasn't going to keep the peace anymore. I was going to protect what was mine. 2 weeks later, James had the paperwork ready, and we prepared for the next steps. He sent the certified notice to vacate first. It was a formal letter delivered by certified mail with return receipt requested, addressed to Michael Rivera and Sarah Rivera at the main house on the Chesterfield property. The language was precise. The property at that address remained in my name, Donna Rivera. No lease agreement existed. As occupants without title or lease, they were required to vacate within 30 days of receipt. A duplicate was served in person by a process server the same day. James explained it was standard practice, belt and suspenders, he called it. No room for claims of "I never got it." The same afternoon, he sent the demand letter regarding the trust. As successor trustee, after my husband Michael had a fiduciary duty, the letter demanded a full accounting of all transactions within 30 days, including receipts, bank records, and explanations for every withdrawal. It referenced the $80,000 in unauthorized distributions. It also formally froze the remaining balance, no further distributions allowed until resolved. I waited. The house felt different now, quieter. I spent the days organizing the files James had asked for, printing duplicates, backing everything up to a secure cloud folder. I didn't call Michael. I didn't text Sarah. I let the letters do the talking. The first call came 3 days after the notice arrived. Michael. His voice was tight, higher than usual. "Mom, what is this?" "A notice to vacate." "This is my house. I've lived here for years. You can't just kick me out." I kept my tone even. "The deed is in my name, Michael. You never asked me to transfer it." He laughed once, short and sharp. "You're destroying this family. You're letting lawyers twist everything. Come over and talk like normal people." I said nothing for a moment. "Then I'm done talking without paperwork." He raised his voice. "You're using your age to manipulate everyone. This isn't fair." I ended the call. I had the recorder app running on my phone. 47 seconds of threats, accusations, and the word family repeated like a shield. Sarah's response came through a group text to the extended family: cousins, aunts, a few old friends who'd known us for decades. 23 recipients. She wrote, just letting everyone know what's happening. Donna is trying to take the house and turn against her own son. She's claiming ownership after all these years of us taking care of everything. She's showing signs of confusion and is being influenced by a lawyer. Please talk to her before this goes further. It's breaking Michael's heart. I read it twice, then I screenshot it and filed it away. The meeting was scheduled for the following week at James's office in downtown St. Louis. A small conference room with a long table, notepads, and bottled water. No big screen, no dramatic presentations, just facts. I arrived early. James was already there, files organized, laptop open. He greeted me with a nod. "We have everything lined up. Stay calm, let the documents speak." Michael and Sarah arrived together. Robert and Linda came separately, looking uncomfortable in their coats. They sat on one side of the table. I sat on the other with James. James started. He placed copies of the deed in front of everyone. The property is titled to Donna Rivera. No transfer occurred. Michael and Sarah are occupants without a lease. The 30-day notice to vacate has been served and received. Michael opened his mouth. James continued without pause. The trust. Revocable living trust established by Donna's late husband. Michael named successor trustee. The document specifies funds for the benefit of the beneficiary, Olivia Rivera. $80,000 withdrawn over 10 years. No documentation provided for educational or direct beneficiary expenses. Instead, records show use for travel, home improvements benefiting third parties, and other non-trust purposes. He slid the bank statements across the table, highlighted lines in yellow. Robert shifted in his seat. Linda stared at her hands. Michael spoke first. "This is ridiculous. I manage the money responsibly. Olivia's future is secure." James looked at him evenly. "Show me the receipts. Show me the college savings account statements. Show me how a Florida vacation for 4 adults qualifies as beneficiary education." Michael's face reddened. "I don't have them here. But I can get them." Sarah added, "This is all a misunderstanding. Donna is confused. She's been influenced." James didn't flinch. "The demand for accounting was sent 2 weeks ago. No response has been received. Under Missouri law, failure to account upon demand from the settlor or beneficiary allows for removal of trustee and potential surcharge for losses." The room went quiet. Robert cleared his throat. "We didn't know about any of this." Linda whispered something to Sarah. Sarah shook her head. I spoke then for the first time. My voice was steady. "I trusted you to take care of the family. Instead, you used what my husband left for your own convenience. You let me pay rent in my own home. You let me be pushed aside. I'm not confused. I'm awake." Michael looked at me, eyes hard. "You're tearing everything apart." I met his gaze. "You tore it apart the day you let your wife pull that chair." No one responded. The silence stretched. One of the cousins who'd been copied on Sarah's text had come as a witness. He stood up quietly and left the room without a word. James closed his folder. "The clock is running." 30 days from receipt of the notice, full accounting due in the same time frame. We'll be in touch. They left without shaking hands. When the notice period ended in early January, Michael and Sarah had no choice but to leave. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs west of St. Louis. $1,800 a month, the first rent check either of them had written in over 15 years. The moving truck pulled out of the driveway on a gray afternoon. Neighbors watched from their porches. No dramatic confrontation, no last-minute pleas. Just the quiet sound of boxes being loaded and doors closing. The house was empty by evening. I walked through it slowly, room by room. The dining table still had faint red stains from the spilled wine. The small folding table near the kitchen door had been taken away. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the weight of what had been lost and the relief of what had been reclaimed. The settlement came quickly after that. James negotiated it outside of probate court to avoid months of hearings and public filings. Michael agreed to repay $60,000 for the rent he had collected without legal right. Another $50,000 from the trust partial restitution for the unauthorized withdrawals. The total would be paid in installments over 2 years. It wasn't the full amount, but James said it was realistic. They want this over quietly, he told me. So do you. I signed the agreement. The money would go into a new account in my name for my future, and whatever I chose to leave Olivia when the time came. The social fallout was slower but just as real. Word spread through the family network. Cousins who had received Sarah's group text stopped replying to her messages. Aunts who once called on holidays now sent only cards. Robert and Linda cut contact almost immediately. They stopped coming to family events, stopped calling. Olivia's visits dwindled to nothing. I still loved her, always would, but I couldn't force a relationship that her parents had poisoned. I sent her a card on her birthday with a simple note. I'm here when you're ready. No pressure, no guilt. I moved back into the main house in February. The place needed work, fresh paint, new curtains, a few repairs to the porch. I hired a local handyman and took my time. I hung the old family photos again, but only the ones that felt true now. Pictures of my husband and me on our wedding day. Michael as a little boy before everything changed. Olivia as a baby in my arms. No photos from recent years, no forced smiles, just the memories that still held warmth. I sent the no-contact letter through James in March. 1 page, formal, clear. Any necessary communication would go through my attorney. No direct calls, no texts, no visits, no exceptions. Michael replied once a handwritten note slipped into the mailbox. You destroyed this family. I hope you're happy. I read it, folded it, and filed it away. I didn't respond. The house was mine again. Quiet. Mine. I woke up in the master bedroom for the first time in decades. I made coffee in the kitchen I had once shared with my husband. I sat on the porch in the afternoons wrapped in a blanket watching the yard. In winter, a light snow dusted the grass. Cardinals landed on the fence. I drank tea and felt the silence settle, not empty but peaceful. Looking back, I see it clearly now. Family isn't blood. It's respect. It's fairness. It's safety. When those things are missing, no amount of shared history can hold it together. I used to think keeping the peace meant staying silent. I was wrong. Setting boundaries when you're disrespected isn't cruel, it's necessary. Your dignity is worth more than a relationship that demands you shrink to fit. Justice doesn't always come from shouting or revenge. It comes from truth, from documents, from the slow turning of legal wheels. It's quieter, but it lasts. And in your later years, protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's honest. It's choosing to live the rest of your life aligned with your own values, not someone else's expectations. I finished my tea, watched the snow fall a little harder, and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Freedom. Not loud, not dramatic, just real. For the first time in many years, the house felt like home again.